Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Olivia Collette, and I'm the marketing coordinator at Concordia University's John Molson Executive Center. I am thrilled to introduce you to Fenton Aylmer, today's speaker and risk management expert. Fenton has over 30 years of experience advising boards and C-suite executives in financial services and fintech. He's an executive director at KPMG's risk advisory practice in Montreal, advising Canada's leading corporate and financial institutions. Prior to joining KPMG, Fenton led product development and banking partnerships at Intelligent, a climate risk analytics firm. And he taught enterprise risk management at Columbia University in New York. His career spans several risk leadership roles, including being a chief risk officer, gaining expertise in enterprise, operational, strategic, and regulatory capital risks. Fenton managed and led the implementation of all aspects of the risk function at New York Community Bank, Citigroup, and Bank of Montreal. In his free time, Fenton enjoys skiing, golfing, travel, music, and cooking. Thank you so much for being with us, Fenton.
Olivia, it's great to be with you.
So let's begin with my first question to you. I remember a while ago renting out a cottage with some friends. And when we arrived, there was a Bible-sized binder filled with instructions. Some of them were useful, and some of them were really odd. I remember some of them seemed obvious, like don't put anything but toilet paper in the toilet, or don't use knives for anything other than cutting food. But then one of my friends who was there with me, he said, there's a disaster behind every rule in that binder. And so in the simplest possible terms, would you say that that binder is a form of risk management?
Yeah, I would. That binder is risk management in action, actually. Every rule in it exists because something once went wrong. So risk management works the same way in any organization. We learn from our experience, we anticipate what could go wrong, and we put simple guardrails in place to prevent it from happening again.
And I've seen the term risk management in job titles, but is risk management something that needs to be your explicit role, or can it be part of what leaders bring to the table in their day-to-day? And according to you, what's the best case scenario and why?
So yeah, it absolutely can and should be in every one of us and part of leadership. So the best leaders think about risk intuitively. They assess uncertainty, weigh trade-offs, and plan for resilience. A dedicated risk function helps structure and formalize that thinking, but the mindset itself really belongs to every employee and every leadership conversation.
And could you define resilience in this context?
Sure. So when leaders regularly assess uncertainty, weigh trade-offs, and plan for resilience, they're doing more than just protecting the organizations from loss. They're building its capacity to adapt and to thrive when things change. So that mindset really means that decisions are made with contingency in mind. Resources are allocated with flexibility, and early warning signals are noticed and acted upon. So our over time, that creates a culture where people don't panic when disruption, they actually pivot, right? So risk-aware leadership, or leadership culture, I should say, doesn't just avoid bad outcomes. It actually makes the company more agile, more confident in uncertainty, and better positioned to seize opportunities from which others might shy away.
And I'm wondering, how can an experienced manager with little or no risk management training contribute to their company's risk management goals in a meaningful way?
Yeah. So I recommend starting by asking what could derail this plan, who could be affected or who would be affected, how would we respond? Managers already know where the vulnerabilities lie. The key is turning that insight into structured discussions that align with organizations' broad strategy and risk priorities.
Give us an example of that.
Okay, so let's say you're a manager in a logistics company, and that company is planning to expand delivery routes into new region. So instead of just asking, can we do it? They might ask, what could disrupt this expansion? What dependencies are we assuming? Are there suppliers' dependencies? Are there prices or fuel prices that we need to consider? What about regulations? And if something goes wrong, what's our backup plan, right? So those kind of questions might surface, for example, whether a company relies on a single regional supplier, or that local regulations around drivers, for example, or driver hours differ from what they're used to, sorry. So the manager then brings those insights into a structured risk discussion, and maybe using a risk register and heat map where leaders assess likelihood and impact. They assign ownership, connect those risks to broad corporate priorities, for example, supply chain resilience or customer satisfaction. And that's kind of how it would work. So in other words, what started off as informal curiosity becomes a documented, shared, and actionable risk perspective that strengthens the company's ability to execute its strategy confidently.
And I'm wondering, how can leaders incorporate a risk management mindset into their leadership practice?
So first, you start by asking those better questions that we talked about. And then you frame the decisions, or the answers, if you will, through multiple lenses like impact, like likelihood, and preparedness. So whether approving a project, allocating a budget, or launching a product, just pause to consider those three things. And over time, that habit embeds risk awareness into everyday management.
And what would you say, like which industries lack a risk management mindset, and why do you think those industries have that shortcoming?
So general rule of thumb, it's the sectors that move fast, like tech startups or creative industries. Sometimes they see risk management as a bureaucracy or hinders towards progress, if you will. But as the sectors mature, they realize that resilience and innovation go hand in hand. So the ability to anticipate risk actually accelerates growth rather than slowing it down.
And I think it's interesting that you mentioned tech startups, because of course, they're very prevalent and in a way such an indicator of economic progress in our, professional sphere. But what would you say are the common risks for tech startups?
So having worked in a climate technology startup, I'm somewhat familiar with those. So common risks for tech startups, they fall into kind of few big categories, if you will. Strategic risks, so betting on the wrong product market fit, for example, misjudging timing, or scaling too fast before demand or infrastructure is actually ready to support that. If you think about infrastructure as kind of the foundation that supports the rest of the company. Financial risks, dependency on a few investors, or very volatile cash flows from period to period, overestimating revenue projections, for example. That's another kind of big category. Operational risks are a big category as well. What's that? That's weak internal controls, that's immature processes, over-reliance on key individuals or founders, and kind of a subset of operational risk are technology and cyber risk. Those are still operational risks, but they're so big that it's such a big issue that it merits a category on its own. So security vulnerabilities, for example, data breaches, system outages, that sort of thing. That would be kind of the cyber security. There are others, really, regulatory and compliance risks as well. Particularly around data privacy, AI ethics, which is actually coming, is a big deal these days, and even emerging technologies. And of course, if you don't manage any of these risks properly, reputational risks, right? So missteps on transparency, product reliability, or social impact can really spread instantly and erode people's trusts and that sort of thing. So what's interesting in these startups is that they see risk management as a constraint, right? Which is what I mentioned earlier. And when in reality, it's actually a strategic enabler. When leaders proactively identify these risks, they can pivot faster, reassure investors, and build scalable structure that supports sustainable growth.
You also run the Enterprise Risk Management Program at the John Molson Executive Center. And in that program, you have the foundational course, but you also have a course on operational risk management and strategic risk management. What is the difference between the two?
In its simplest form, operational risk management deals with how you deliver, right? So processes, systems, people, technology, and the day-to-day execution of that delivery. Strategic risk management looks at what you choose to pursue, right? So your long-term goals, your competitive positioning, the external forces, and that shifts all of those kind of factors, or those forces can shift your strategy or render it actually obsolete. So both are vital. Operational risks can trip you up now or today, and strategic ones can kind of derail you tomorrow.
Now, we've all heard of grocery items that were recalled because of some problem on the factory floor. If we were looking at those scenarios from an operational risk management mindset, what would be the risks we'd try to mitigate in, say, food production? And how do leaders put that mitigation into action?
So operational risk would focus on process failures in this particular example. So contamination controls, equipment maintenance, supplier quality, employee training, even, and then crisis response as well. So leaders would ensure controls, monitoring, and accountability mechanisms are in place. So the issue is detected early, or as early as possible anyway, and handled quickly. That's really the basics of it.
And if we look at the same food production company, what would strategic risk management look like?
So strategic risk would look more upstream. So how do supply chain disruptions, changing customer preferences, or new regulations affect our growth and reputation, right? So it's about anticipating shifts that could make the business model itself less viable, not just fixing what went wrong in production.
You know, you mentioned food production being impacted by trends, and it immediately made me think of food trends like a croissant that's stuffed with massive amounts of filling, or buzzwords like superfoods, and most diets, which often rely on a new vocabulary to create taboos about, around whatever it is that you're not supposed to eat. And then I think of a company like Weight Watchers, which has managed to survive the paleo diet, the no carb movement, the liquid diets. What do you notice about strategic risk management and resilience in a company like Weight Watchers?
So that's actually a really great example. So a company like Weight Watchers has faced wave after wave of disruption, or attempted disruption anyway, from new diet trends to digital fitness apps, and yet they're still standing, right? So what they've done well is stay clear to their core purpose. And what's that, right? So helping people live healthier lives. So while, and then they stick to that clear purpose while being flexible on how to deliver on it, right? So that's strategic resilience in action. So they've pivoted their models several times, from in-person group meetings to online programs, from a focus to calorie counting to overall wellness, and now even integrating AI-driven tracking and coaching. So each of those shifts reflects a strategic risk response, recognizing when their assumptions about customer behavior or competitions are changing, and adjusting before it's too late, right? So the lesson in this case is this: that strategic risk management, it's about predicting, if you will, the next diet trend. It's about building the awareness, agility, decision making that lets you adapt to any kind of trend, right? So resilience comes from continuously shifting your strategy, or adapting your strategy, if you will, with your environment, while staying true to your core purpose.
Well, so that's a good example of a really, really large international company. But what about smaller and medium-sized businesses who may not have the resources of a larger corporation? What does risk management look like for them?
Any corporation, whether large or SME, pretty much already do risk management informally, right? So the key is to make it intentional and proportional. Identify the few risks that could really threaten survival or reputation, and then assign ownership and review them regularly. So that's a simple framework, and a simple framework does not really require many resources. i.e. money. So that's easy to implement, or straightforward to implement, I should say, and can go a long way for smaller organizations.
You know, this makes me think of ad agencies. In a city like Montreal, you have quite a lot of ad agencies, and that kind of work is quite popular. But you have a combination of really big agencies who are multinational, and then you have some that are smaller and more local, sometimes even servicing a more regional market. What does strategic risk management look like for the smaller agency?
So for a smaller agency, strategic risk management isn't really about complex models or competing head to head against their larger rivals with deep pockets, right? It's about clarity and foresight. It means asking, where are we more exposed? Maybe we're exposed to one or two big clients, or maybe one key creative lead. How will the industry and our clients evolve, or their needs evolve, right? So for example, the rise of AI-driven content, privacy rules that affect ad targeting. So all of that kind of affects your strategy. What's our relative strengths to our core competition or to our core competencies? Maybe we are more innovative and daring to push the boundaries. So that makes us more nimble. And what's our plan to adapt, right? So it might look like diversifying the client base, building partnership that expands kind of capabilities, or cross-training staff, keeping an eye on emerging tech. That could change the process, right? Or that could change the creative process, right? So that's all that is important and necessary. So in short, a smaller firm, for smaller firms, strategic risk management is really about staying agile without losing your focus, knowing when you're vulnerable, scanning the horizon, and being ready to proactively pivot when the market forces you to.
And, you know, regardless of your company size, what should be in your risk management toolbox?
Three things. So a clear view of objectives, right? So you can link risks to what truly matters. A repeatable process, right? So identifying those risks, assessing those risks, and acting on material risks. And then a culture of openness, right? Where people are encouraged to surface concerns early. That combination builds resilience far more effectively than any single tool or template.
And I wonder, is training an important factor to consider in all of this?
Well, I'm obviously biased. I do think that training is important. I've been teaching enterprise risk management for over 5 years now. And I've taken part in training or led training in many of the organizations that I've been part of, or I've been fortunate to be part of. So yes, the answer is yes, emphatically yes. Training employees on just the basics even of risk management changes the way people see their work. Employees start spotting patterns and potential issues earlier, not because they're being cautious, but because they understand how decisions, processes, and outcomes are all interconnected. So they learn to ask better questions, like the questions that we reviewed earlier, and use structured tools to assess impact and likelihood, and communicate risks in a way leaders can act on, right? So it's not just enough to raise your hand. You also have to kind of frame it in a way that will get the leader's attentions. And that shared language and mindset breaks down silos, finance, operations, HR, and strategy that starts seeing risk in a kind of with a shared responsibility. So when that happens across an organization, resilience becomes cultural and not just procedural, right? So you move from reacting to a problem to anticipating them. And that's when companies really truly start to turn uncertainty into opportunity.
Fenton, I want to thank you sincerely for being with us today. This has been a really very informative session.
Thank you, Olivia. It's been a great pleasure.
Pleasure was all mine. Take care, guys. Bye.